Four Crowns, Episode 1, The Heir, written by Mia. The four most dangerous men in a city I'd never heard of walked into my life on the worst night of a year that had been nothing but worse nights, and the first thing I felt, God help me, was not fear. It was the bone-deep, exhausted irritation of a woman who has finally got her shift covered, her rent almost made, and her walls almost high enough, and can tell, on sight, that someone is about to knock all three down. I was closing up the bar. That's the whole of who I was, that night. Ava, 26, no last name worth saying, closing up a bar in the wet part of the city where the rent was cheap because the river smelled. It had been a bad year, even by my standards, and my standards were subterranean. The woman who'd run the bar before me, Trish, the closest thing to family I'd let myself have in a decade, had died in the spring, fast, a stroke, here and then gone, and left me the lease and a register that didn't quite balance, and the particular loneliness of being, once again, the person nobody had thought to make arrangements for. I'd been treading water since. Double shifts, the rent almost made, sleeping in the back room because my flat's boiler had died and the landlord wasn't answering, telling myself it was temporary. The way I'd told myself everything was temporary since I was 6 and learned that permanent was a word adults used right before they changed their minds about you. So when I say my walls were almost high enough, understand what I was building them against. Not danger. I could handle danger. I was building them against hope, against the specific catastrophe of letting myself want a thing that could be taken. I'd been in 11 foster homes and 0 good ones. I'd learned early, the only lesson that ever held, that everyone who comes toward you wants something, and the trick to surviving is to figure out what before they do. And I'd built a whole life on it, small and locked in mine, and I was wiping down the last table when the door I'd already bolted opened anyway. For men, and the air changed. I want to be precise about how it changed because it's the thing I keep coming back to. It wasn't that they were beautiful, though they were, in 4 completely different and completely unfair ways. It was that the room rearranged itself around them, the way a room does around weather, around things that don't belong indoors. The lights guttered. The river damp went cold. And every animal instinct I'd spent 26 years sharpening stood straight up and screamed the same thing at once. Predators, 4 of them, and they have all come for you. We're closed, I said, because what else do you say? The one in front almost smiled. He was all cut angles and cold patience, dressed in charcoal so dark it drank the light, and his eyes moved over me and the bar and the exits in a single unhurried sweep that told me he'd already counted everything in the room worth counting, including how fast I could reach the knife under the till. Ava, he said. Not a question. He knew. My name is Sable. I'm aware this will be difficult to believe, and we don't have time for me to be gentle about it, so I'll simply say it. You are not who you think you are, the people who hid you are dead, and in about 4 minutes the things that killed them are going to come through that door whether you believe me or not. We'd prefer to have this conversation somewhere they can't. I should have run. I'm good at running. I've done it from 11 homes. But the second man laughed, a warm, golden, delighted sound, completely wrong for the cold room, and slung himself onto a bar stool like he owned it, and grinned at me with a face that had clearly been talking itself out of trouble its whole life. Sable, you absolute gravestone. You can't just tell a woman the people who hit her are dead and then mention the murder timeline. She'll bolt. He turned the grin on me, and it was the kind of smile that makes you check your own pockets afterward.
Gah.
House flame. Ignore the human iceberg. We all do. He's right about the 4 minutes, though. That part's annoyingly real. Can I just say, and I mean this with enormous respect for a frankly terrifying night, You are taking for armed strangers broke into my bar remarkably well. I had a knife on you before the door finished opening, I said. It's still on you. The big one hasn't noticed where my other hand is. A silence. And then the third man, quiet, broad, standing near the door with the stillness of deep water, the only one of them who hadn't looked at me like a problem to solve, said, in a low voice with a current under it. I noticed. His eyes found mine, steady and gray-green and strangely gentle for a man built like a seawall.
Rune.
House tied.
You can keep the knife.
After the year you've had, you've earned the right to hold something. And the awful thing, the thing that cracked something in my chest I'd had welded shut since the 7th foster home, was that he meant it. He wasn't disarming me. He was telling me I was allowed to be afraid and armed, and that he'd think less of me if I weren't. The fourth man hadn't spoken at all. He prowled the edge of the room, restless, all coiled muscle and a half-feral wariness, watching the bolted door I'd already locked like he expected it to betray us. And when he finally looked at me, his eyes were amber and bright, and there was something in them that wasn't the cold assessment of the first man, or the charm of the second, or the gentleness of the third. It was recognition, like he knew me, like he'd been looking for me a long time, and was furious at how long it had taken. Bram, he said, rough, low. Iron. And we are out of minutes. They're here. The lights went out. What came through my bolted door was not a person, and I don't have good words for it even now, so I'll just tell you what I saw. A wrongness, a thing made of the absence of things, and it came for me specifically, across my own bar, the way water finds a drain. And then the four most dangerous men in a city I'd never heard of put themselves between it and me, and I learned, in about 90 seconds of impossible violence in the dark, exactly what each of them was. Sable didn't move much. He simply decided things, and Shadows did what he decided, peeling off the walls like cloth and wrapping the wrongness in dark. Cass burned, actual fire, golden and laughing even now, called up out of his open hands. Rune raised a wall of something that moved like water and hit like the tide. And Bram simply became a great deal larger and more terrible than a man, and threw himself at the thing with his whole body, the way you'd cover a grenade, the way you protect a thing you've decided is yours. They were not protecting a bar. They were protecting me. For men from 4 houses that, I would learn, would much rather have killed each other, spending themselves without a half-second's hesitation between a foster kid with a paring knife and a thing from the dark. I should have been screaming. Any sane person would have been screaming. Instead, I stood with my back against my own bar and watched the impossible happen and felt, underneath the terror, the strangest thing, a kind of recognition, as though some buried part of me had always known the world was bigger and stranger than 11 foster homes had let on, and was only now watching a man peel shadow off a wall to save my life, exhaling a breath it had been holding for 26 years. Bram took a wound meant for me across his forearm and didn't so much as glance at it. Cass put himself between me and the dark while still, somehow, finding the breath to tell me it was going to be fine. Sweetheart, eyes front. Rune never once left the line between me and the door. And Sable directed all of it, cold and exact, like a man conducting an orchestra made of teeth. I should have run. I want to keep saying that, because it's the truest measure of how strange the night was. That a woman who'd run from every good and bad thing in her life stood absolutely still in the eye of 4 men doing magic, and did not want to be anywhere else. When it was over, when the wrongness came apart into nothing and the light stuttered back and the 4 of them stood breathing hard in the ruin of my small locked life, I was still holding the knife, and my hand was steady, and I looked at the 4 impossible men who'd just bled for a stranger, and I said the only thing my whole guarded life had taught me to say. "What do you want from me?" Not "thank you." Not "what was that?" Everyone who comes toward me wants something. You four just walked through fire for it. So it's big. What is it? It was Sable who told me, because of course it was. The others, I'd learn. Let him carry the cold things. "There's a city," he said. "You won't have heard of it. You're not meant to have. Vaymore. It's been hidden since before your city's streets were named, and it's was held together by an accord between 4 houses that would otherwise have burned it and each other to ash centuries ago. Shadow.
Flame. Tide.
Iron. He nodded, fractionally, at each man as he named them, and I understood I was looking at 4 crowns for houses, standing in my wrecked bar in a truce that I could feel was costing them. The accord was anchored by a single bloodline. Neutral. Founding. The keystone the 4 arches lean on. As long as the keystone held, no house could move on the others without bringing the whole thing down on its own head.
His cold eyes held mine.
2 weeks ago, the last keeper of that bloodline died. The keystone's gone. And Vaymore has about a season before 4 houses with very long memories stop pretending the accord still means anything and turn the city into a grave. That's a terrible story, I said. I'm a bartender. I don't have a house. I don't have a last name. You have the oldest one there is, Rune said quietly from the door. They hid you in the human world the day you were born, in the care of people sworn to keep you ordinary and safe, because a keystone that knows what it is a keystone every house will fight to own. Those people are the ones who died 2 weeks ago, Ava, protecting the secret of you. The thing that came through your door tonight was sent to make sure you never found out what you are before the houses could come and use you. And what am I? My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that even then. Say it plainly. I've had a long year and a longer life, and I am all the way out of patience for men being mysterious in the dark. Bram answered, the feral one. He crossed the room. The others tensed, like his nearness to me was itself a violation of some treaty, and he stopped close, too close, amber eyes burning, and he said it like it cost him, like it had been caught in his throat since the door opened. You're the heir, the keystone, the one thing in the whole world that can hold the accord or break it, and to anchor it, the rite binds the keystone to all 4 houses at once. One of each of us. His jaw worked. You don't get to pick a house, Ava. That's the whole point of you. The day the keystone chooses one of us is the day the other 3 have a reason to start the war. So the rite makes you ours, all 4, and none of us gets to have you. Not really, not the way. He stopped, furious at himself, at the situation, at me for existing. It binds the 4 of us to one woman we're not allowed to fight over and not allowed to fully have, and ties our 4 houses' survival to whether we can manage that without killing each other for the rest of our lives. I looked at each of them in turn while that settled into me. Sable, who'd watched me like a problem and then told me the truth without softening a single edge of it. Cass, whose grin had finally faltered, who looked under all the charm, like a man bracing to be refused by yet another person he decided to want. Rune, steady by the door, watching me with that gentleness that asked for nothing and so undid everything. And Bram, too close, furious, amber-eyed, looking at me like I was both the answer to a lifelong question and the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Which, I was beginning to understand, I was, to all 4 of them at once, bound to a stranger, forbidden to fight over her, forbidden to fully have her, for the rest of their lives, by a rite older than the city, because a dying bloodline had inconveniently produced one last bartender with a paring knife and a trust problem the size of the river outside. The four of them stood in the wreck of my bar, and not one of them was looking at the others, and the air between all five of us was suddenly so charged I could taste it, and I understood, with the bone-deep, exhausted, furious clarity of a woman whose walls have just been knocked flat by exactly the people she knew on sight would do it. That everyone who comes toward you wants something, and that four of the most dangerous men alive had just walked through fire to tell me that what they wanted was to belong to me, completely, forever, and to never once be allowed to say so. "The rite is tomorrow night," Sable said, into the silence. "If you live till then, if you say yes." A pause, and even his cold voice had something underneath it now. "We came to bring you home, Ava. None of us is entirely sure anymore which of us is the one being claimed." To be continued. That was episode 1 of 4 Crowns. If the 4 of them have you now, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus scenes are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.